This training is going to cover bringing points from a comma delimited file into AutoCAD Civil 3D 2010 into the NRCS template. I'll be using version 1.1 of the template dated December 14th of 2011. Some of the items I'll be going over are point groups in Civil 3D and in our template, a little bit of how they work, point file formats which are needed to bring in points. We'll go through the import point command. Then I'll discuss point group display order, and then also talk a little bit about editing points. I'll switch over to Civil 3D 2010 right now. I'm going to go to the tool space of my NRCS template. I'm looking at different point groups. There's an existing list of point groups that are in this template. And in general, the way point groups work is they have a property that helps it decide which things go into this point group. I'm going to right click on the survey control group and look at the properties of it to give you an idea of how that works. I'll click on the include tab for this particular one, and in this example these are the type of items that would cause something to be part of this survey control group. What I have highlighted right now is TBM asterisk. So any shot that has a label of TBM with the asterisk meaning any additional labels can come after it. Anything that would match that would end up becoming part of the survey control group. On the Information tab, there are default styles. In this template, we have the default styles enabled so that they affect how objects are displayed. Things in the survey control group will use a benchmark point style and a point label style that would display northing, easting, the point number, elevation, and description. Points can be part of more than one group. For instance, at the very bottom of the list we've got an all points group. Every single point that's brought in, that's imported, will become part of the all points group, and those points might be part of additional groups as well. Point file formats are important for bringing the points into a project. What I'll do now is we'll start the process to bring a point in. There's several ways to bring points in. I'm going to go to the Insert tab of the ribbon and use the Points from File command to bring points in. At the top of my list here, I've got a pull down where I can set the format of the point file that I'm going to bring in. I'll click on the pull down here to show you some of the preset point file formats that are available. The one I'm going to use is name, northeast, elevation, and description. That's pretty similar to the one that's labeled as point number, northeast, elevation, and description, except that in the form of point number, northing, easting, elevation, description, it has to be a number. Some data collectors allow alphanumeric, so that's what we're utilizing, and I'm going to use the name, northeast, elevation, description file format. I'll select that, and I'm going to go ahead and find the point file that I want to bring in. I'll go ahead and click Open. I don't have to worry about adding points to a point group because it's automatically going to occur the way we have our template set up, and the advanced options aren't critical for what we're doing at this time either. I'll go ahead and click OK, and Civil 3D will start processing those points to bring them in to CAD. The command line is back, that dialog box has disappeared, so it's brought the points in. And I'm going to go back to my tool space to take a look and see what happened. Typically what you'll see is if you see these yellow warning shields, you'll know that something is out of date. That's common in a lot of the processes in Civil 3D. When you see an out of date sign, that means somehow you need to tell it to rebuild or update the group. I'm going to right click on point groups and tell it to go ahead and update all the files to make sure that those point groups are properly applied. Once I've done that, and those shields have disappeared, any point group that has objects in it are going to display a dot to the left of them. So I'm going to click on the survey control group. When I do that, it does actually displays the points that are part of that survey control group. Or the flow line group, I'll click on that, and it displays the points that are part of that flow line group. Also, all of the points that come in show up underneath this points listing up above. I don't use that one very often, but it may be a way to have a quick display of the points all as an entire group rather than going into the look at the individual point groups. What I do want to do is zoom to all those points, and from the points list I can right click on that, click zoom to, and that would be like doing a zoom extents to the set of points. I zoom to there, it brings up my survey points that it brought in, and I'll window in and take a look at some of those points. One of the ways that you can get to specific points is by going to the prospector of the tool space and looking at survey control points. For instance, let's say I wanted to get to control point number 1. I'll click on it, I'll right click and zoom to, and it zooms into that particular control point. What I'm going to do is there's a miscellaneous point group that's sort of a catch-all for points that don't fit into any of these other ones, that don't have a label that matches anything else. I'm going to see what there is in that miscellaneous point group. Here it's telling me that there's 48 points in the tooltip. It's popping up and telling me that there's 48 points in this group. And typically those are ones that don't match any other description in general. I'm going to zoom into this first one just to take a look and see what it looks like. So I'm going to use zoom to, and it was point number 10 that I zoomed to. So there I can see there's my point. Maybe that had a B for a label on it. Maybe they really had intended it to be a bank shot. So at this point we could look at it a little bit closer and determine if that's what we really wanted to have. Let's say I've determined that that really should have been labeled as a bank shot. I'm going to go over to my tool space and right click on that point and tell it that I want to edit the point. When I click on edit, it brings up the panorama window for the point editor, and if that really should have been a bank shot, I can change that raw description to BK, and then I can click on the check mark in the upper portion of the box. Once I do that, you can see that the point groups are out of date. So really, this miscellaneous group, that once I changed that description, it shouldn't be in the miscellaneous group, but apparently it should be in the banks group. And you do have to right click on point groups and go back to update. and you can see that it's changed this point to use the BK bank label and added it to that point group instead. The point groups also affect how shots are displayed in a drawing. By right-clicking on point groups and going to properties, it brings up a dialog box that we can use to change which points are displayed or how they're displayed. At the very bottom of this list, we've got a group called off. If I move that list, that point group, farther up the list, anything that falls in groups below off will not be displayed. So let me go ahead and move this up to almost the very top of the list. I'll leave it so that only survey control is above off. I'll go ahead and click OK, and I'll window out, and you can see that it looks like only survey control points are being displayed. So instead of using layers to try to affect which items are displayed, we can go back to the point group, right click, go to properties, and use the off tool to affect what's being displayed. A lot of times I might want to see survey control, flow line, and banks. So I move my off group down below those, go ahead and click OK. And then this might be an easier way for me to see points so that maybe I can draw in break lines for some of my flow line shots. The basic way that this really works is if a point is in multiple groups, the point group that it's in that's closest to the top will be the overriding factor for how a point is displayed. So the off group has all points contained in it. If I move it above all of the other ones, all of the points would, by the fact that they're in this group and it's at the top of the list, it would be the controlling item that affects the display. If I move it farther down the list and a point is already in a group before that, then whichever group is above there will affect the display of that particular point. I'll move my off list down below. I'll move it all the way back down towards the bottom. I'll click OK and let things regenerate. Let's take a look at another point here. Here's a ground shot labeled with a G, and we have a point group for ground shots. Ground plane. I'm going to right click on that, go into the properties, and show you how you can affect how all of those items in that point group are displayed. Since a ground shot is just that, really all I need to know is elevation. I don't need to see a description saying that it is a ground shot. If I change this label style just to elevation, I know it's a ground shot. I don't have to worry about a label that goes with it. I'll change that to elevation, click OK, and then Civil 3D goes in and updates all of those ground shots to display only the elevation. So that's a way that you can change the display of any particular group of points. There are a few other tools to talk about. You can lock points so that they can't be edited. A quick way to lock all the points in the drawing would be to go up to our points, right click, and tell it that we want to lock. It'll take a couple seconds for Civil 3D to go ahead and lock those points. And once it does, in the lower part of the tool space, you'll see that it puts a lock symbol by it. that means we won't be able to go in and move those points around. We can still go ahead and move the labels around. I'll go over to one of these waterway shots and select it. And I'm going to use the grip that lets me drag the label off to the side. So I can still drag the label, but it's not going to let me move that point from where it was. So locking the points is probably a worthwhile thing to do so that you don't accidentally make changes to something. This has been an intro on how to bring points in, a little bit on how to edit them, and once you get your points brought in and looked through, then you'd be ready to go ahead and add break lines and get it ready for a survey, a surface model creation.